The next area I want to move into are item types. We've done a lot of work in the last few releases on that. I'm going to start with a bunch of stuff that we did. There was a big uplift in 22R1 or the 10.11 release. And the first big thing that we did was make it much easier for you to write item type expressions. If you've ever had to do this manually or you were doing this before this release, number one, there was a lot of stuff we didn't have exposed from the civil side. You just couldn't get to that data. And number two, even those things that were exposed, it was pretty difficult trying to figure out what those expressions were. So what we've done is we've given you a couple of new ways to write those expressions and get at them. First of all this is structured to kind of mirror the way text favorites are set up. So it's the same hierarchy that text favorites have. And we built an IntelliSense into the expression builder. So if you start typing civil element properties, it'll bring up a menu then and says, oh, well, these are the next items within that feature or that tree that are available. So if I was trying to get at a feature name, I could type in this expression and drill down through it. So that IntelliSense helps a lot because it does guide you and give you valid expressions. I'm not that energetic. I want an easier way to do it though. So we've also given you the ability to just go select an element, go into your properties, find that civil property you want, right click on it and say copy EC expression, then come over and paste it in the expression builder. And you'll see it's built out the exact same expression the IntelliSense would have. If I wanted some different information like a feature definition, I could paste that in and notice it's a slightly different expression that would get at my feature definition. Now this is not limited to geometry. This works across the nature of everything that's in the civil environment. So I could select a mesh, maybe pull in the volume off of that mesh. Or maybe I wanted to select a drainage node. I'm going to select that in my 2D. I'm going to grab the invert elevation off of that and paste that into here. So much easier to get at expressions within the interface. Now, I will warn you that that copy EC expression on the right-click menu is only available if you activate this configuration variable. So it's not in there by default. You have to activate it if you want that in your interface. The next thing that we added is the ability to compute stations and offsets from a true expression. Now, we could compute stations and offsets before using the Asset Manager tool, which is a tool that we're looking to retire relatively soon here in the products. But there was also a challenge with the Asset Manager in the way that it did stations and offsets in that they were a static computation. When you ran it, it went and computed things, but it never updated them automatically if things changed. You had to remember to go back and rerun that manually. So what we've added in this 2R1 release are some new civil expressions that you can put on elements that will compute those stations and offsets automatically. And here's some examples of those that I've put on this sidewalk element. Now they're blank right now. They're blank because I have to feed them the name of the geometry that I want the stations and offsets computed from. And I'm doing that by just keying that into another item type property. So once I enter that, you see those stations and offsets being computed. Now the return values for those are all just generic numbers. And we did that so that you can format them within the expression however you want. So if you want the plus and 2 digits and then 3 decimal places, or like in this case, I'm even putting the alignment name in square brackets, I'm putting RT and LT for the lefts and rights, you can control all that. If you don't want it, or if you want your lefts and rights to be plus and minus signs, all of that is very controllable through here. Now, if I went in and I changed the start station of my geometry, notice that these station values update immediately. I didn't have to go run another command. I didn't have to update anything. This is the nature of item type expressions in that they're always working to keep themselves up to date. Now let's take a look at an example of another little piece of sidewalk here. It's computing those stations and offsets just like we saw before off the main line. But what if I didn't want to come off that main line? What if I wanted to come off this side road? Well, I could simply change the alignment that I'm feeding into there, and those expressions would update to compute off of there. very flexible. If you wanted to compute off both of these at once, you could do that as well. So I've just adjusted the expression, so I'm actually reading in two different reference alignments and computing the station off both of those at the same time. We got a lot of feedback from users as they were using item types that they didn't always want to see the item type properties. So in the 22R1 release, we added some new capabilities to tell it that you didn't want to see your item types in the tool settings or the quick properties windows. So there's two new configuration variables. If you define these, item types are simply not shown in those dialogs. Keeps them a little simpler, keeps them a little more straightforward, streamlines your user interface a little bit. Now, I will remind you that item types are always shown in the properties dialog, regardless of whether these are set or not. So you can still always get at your item types there. Some other general updates that we made to item types in that same release, this was in 10.11 or 22R1, is there are some new latitude and longitude functions in there. So you can pass in a point 3D and it'll convert those to lats and longs. There is some extended support for spaces and extended character sets within lookup spreadsheets. Makes things a little bit easier. And the one that's most important to me is we've added some ability to have hierarchical or nested pick lists. Because long pick lists can get a bit inefficient to use. So we've given this ability to have one pick list dependent on another. And you could nest that 2 or 3 deep if you want. So here, let's take an example, look at an example with some signs. And I've got 2 pick lists in this example, a sign series. And if I go pick that series, let's pick school signs, and then I go under my sign selection pick list, this list is now being limited to just our school signs. Go back to our sign series, change it to something like railroad, you'll see the number of signs that are in here are limited. So it makes it very easy to manage those pick lists, and there's a lot of uses for that. Derek showed us earlier some of the new IFC capabilities, and you'll find those pick lists in there are doing the same thing. So as you pick the IFC version that you want to go out to, the categories and the types that are permissible or defined that exist for those versions are filtered using that same technique. In 10.12 or 22R2, we added some additional expressions for some civil data. And in particular, these are item type expressions to drill into corridors, linear templates, and surface templates and extract some information out of there. So you may, if you've tried to do this, you may have seen some other approaches to getting at this. Those are very inefficient compared to these new expressions that we put in here. So here you can see I've got a mesh element selected, and I'm reading from that mesh things like my corridor name, my horizontal vertical alignment name, my template drop name, the station ranges of the template drops. We can pick up multiple template drops even if they're in there. We've also added the ability to compute the 3D length of something directly from a mesh element. Now you can pass in a point name. In this case, I'm passing in curb top left or change it to curb face flow line, and it'll compute the linear length, the 3D length along that point that makes up that mesh element. So you can control exactly where it's computing that 3D length at. Now, if you don't pass in that name, we'll still compute the 3D length, but we're going to compute it at the point nearest the center line and with the highest elevation.